Hello and welcome to the J plus R movie podcast. I'm very sorry that we've been absent for so long, but we are back now and we are here to review the movie that we promised many months ago, The Accountant. We follow a man seemingly named Christian Wolf, who is an autistic accountant that seemingly just does accountancy for various companies, but we kind of find out as it goes on that does he have involvement in criminal enterprises, but he also is a very well-trained pseudo assassin. We get into this one very specific conflict that he has with this specific company. We also get an insight into his past and also the Treasury Department's attempts to basically uncover the mystery surrounding him. That's how I'd put it.
I enjoyed the film. It was decent. It worked for the most part. I wouldn't say that I loved it. It had some problems.
To use basically a puzzle metaphor, because that's how the movie opens, I would say it's one where the overall puzzle itself, I think, is kind of a bit cluttered, a bit awkward, kind of clunky. But I do think that the individual pieces are good. I just kind of wish it came together a bit better than it did. But I do think that if you were just to separate certain things just individual stuff, are quite intriguing and could probably sustain an entire film on their own. It is kind of a bit of a jumbled movie because there is so much going on in it.
I think focus is something that needed. It had a lot of disparate strands, but they didn't tie them up as satisfyingly as they could have done because they had to move on to the next thing really quickly. And I think it would have been better to focus on two things. I think it was the mystery side of it would have been a really good thing to focus on, like the mystery around Christian Wolf. That's what they were trying to do, kind of create this image of this actually very, very impenetrable man. I thought that was quite interesting. And the way he built up the relationship with Dana while having that, because those two things going on, to be fair, both of them are enough for their own movie, but those two things running side by side make for a very meaty film. Mm-hmm. And you didn't need a lot of the extra stuff that they threw in. But while it wasn't bad, it did impact the overall film because of how much was going on. I mean, like I said, it was decent at the film. I enjoyed it, but it just had so much going on that it didn't have that clearer focus on what it was wanted to say.
Yeah, kind of. I think that's most evident in the first act, because in the first act, it takes a while to actually get to the main story, which to some degree is the accounting for this company that does limb replacements, and then them hiring people to be killed and stuff, and then them going after Dana, and then he has to get involved in all that. It takes a while to get there because we have the setup of Christian's backstory, we have the setup of the Treasury investigation, we have the setup of the Braxton character as well. I think it takes about 40 minutes maybe to get there, and I think it could have. You are kind of right that if it was literally just Treasury stuff and the relationship between him and Dana, then it's we would have just instantly got it going, and that might have provided a better canvas to then unveil his backstory and unveil what he's doing and even unveil the main plot as well.
It would have kept a lot of the mystery they were trying to maintain.
And the film still to some degree tries to keep that and kind of slowly reveal itself across the main story. It has quite a few reveals. Some of them I think are quite effective. The entire reveal that Braxton is in reality Christian's brother, it does add a really interesting layer to the film about this broken family, and it ties into the backstory and also makes Braxton himself a more interesting person as well, because I would say he's probably the most charismatic and probably one of the most enjoyable people in the movie. He doesn't seem to be a good guy, but he has this affable quality about him.
Without being good. After that moment, the moment at the end when you've got him and Braxton together, so they're just talking, and it's and Braxton's just kind of there I want a brotherly relationship with you. We don't have it. I just love that it ended in that conversation. Turned the whole planet into a bit of a brother's spat, and it was emotionally quite resonant, especially with the themes they had. But because it was kind of a little bit dull to get there, and we didn't know that Braxton was the brother and had those kind of feelings anyway to resolve, it felt a little bit, I don't know, sudden.
As far as the flashbacks go, the emphasis was on the father and the son, not the two brothers. And I can kind of see how maybe they were trying to specifically get that across, that the other brother, although he went through the same training as Christian, didn't get that same kind of attention from either his father or his other brother. It does feel a little bit out of nowhere. I do agree. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that the pieces are better than the construction, because I feel a better way of getting to that thing would have made that climax a lot more impactful. But on its own, it was, I agree, very effective. But I do also think that the film can maybe be a little bit self-conscious with its reveals as well. I think the main one that felt a bit awkward to me was the whole Treasury investigation. They're building to basically this reveal Ray didn't actually want Wolf to be caught because he was assisting him the entire time. And they do it based on this flashback of Wolf going to this mafia place and like murdering a bunch of criminals in retaliation for his mentor being killed. And they open the movie with that. And although it's an effective cold open, it's a bit too out of context. It does feel like a bit of a forced way of trying to grab your attention. It's very effective and mysterious, and the sound design is really good. Like, it really comes off, even though you're not in the sequence itself. Like, what he's doing sounds so loud and brutal when we revisit that scene later on as well. I think the scene where it's like the gun is being pointed at the back of Ray's head and Christian Wolf is basically like questioning him on whether or not like he's a good agent or a good father. I think that's a really solid scene as well. Really well acted. And it does like kind of tie the story together. There's a good reason why he's asking him why he's a good father. And you can see how just that alone would then tie these two together.
He's like an abused child seeking out a better example of those relationships just because he didn't have them. Again, as an individual piece, you're right, that's really interesting.
He has like 5 like father figures in this movie as well, you know, like 5 potential father figures. You've got Ray, you've got Francis, you even have the main villain, a Lamar, kind of, in a sense. You have his own father, you know, like you have a bunch of people that could serve as like father figures. There is that definitely that underpinning to the film. And I think that the film, it doesn't embrace being like an action film. It does try to go for being a bit more like thoughtful and a bit more dialogue heavy and a bit more of a slow burn as well. And you know, I do appreciate that about it.
It could have very, very easily been a very simple action film that kind of followed the visual structures and just kind of kept like a lot of the relationships and especially this kind of stuff around is awesome as well. And they could have treated it as window dressing, if you get what I mean. Used it as a thing like to go, look, we're different without actually being different. But they actually took the time to be thoughtful about it and kind of really push that this was a more meditative action film with kind of the slow burn aspects. And it could have very easily been something quite a lot simpler and used the relationship with Dana as a classic guy gets the girl sort of thing. And they avoided a lot of that kind of stuff and just sort of let it be thoughtful. Again, if they committed to what they wanted to say, I think that would have worked even better.
The film, although it does have like beginning, middle, and end, there is an attempt at ambiguity in the movie, and it doesn't necessarily take a lot of stances. This is mainly seen, I think, in the backstory with the father. I have a certain opinion on how that stuff was, but I don't think that the film is necessarily giving a specific viewpoint. It's just sort of saying, okay, this happened, and it's up to you to decide whether or not this was correct or wrong.
It can work, and doing that with moments is great, but I think that what that also does is muddle any idea of a message. It doesn't get to feel like it's got a fully realized voice.
It almost tries so hard to be like intelligent and deep that it maybe ends up not being hugely deep, but if that makes any sense.
Because it's got a lot of things, of the effects of domestic abuse, delve into kind of like conspiracy theories as well, and kind of nature of justice. It's got so much going on that it doesn't really have the ability to dive into all of them. It has a breadth of deep topics without going deeply into any of those deep topics, is the way I would put it. Let's have a chat about, I think, the visuals. Because I think the visuals are interesting. I quite liked the scene where he's doing the accountancy, and because although it's obviously a very generic kind of thing, the way he was laying out all of the pictures, it had this nice, satisfying rhythm, getting himself prepared, and then while he's writing on it, you do get the idea it was this all-consuming thing because he was just surrounded by text, but then the way that he was gliding slowly in that frame as he was surrounded by all these numbers that he'd drawn out, things like that really gave an image of like comfort and security in those kind of things, as opposed to what often happens when you do that, which is kind of like delusion or mad genius. It simply seemed organized and efficient and comfortable, which I thought was a nice little twist on that. It wasn't like lit in any sort of darker way. It was quite brightly lit.
It was almost like I was seen out of a much lighter film. That was appropriate given how his character does definitely have a passion for like math.
And it didn't do that thing that a lot of action films do, which was go with a more grey, washed out kind of colour palette to make it gritty and violent. I wouldn't say the colours are amazing in the film, but you get, like at the end, you get that, you do get quite a shadowed bluish look, which is quite interesting. And then you get those brighter, more clinical areas, which is wherever Christian lives, so you get the idea of how clean, how straightforward everything is, and how organised he just is as a person. It's a film that's colourful, and I think that really works quite well.
Personally, the most visually interesting stuff, weirdly, was the stuff set in the woods.
It's really, really interesting as a setting. I think it's especially interesting when the assassin shows up to try and get to him, because you get, you still get, like, they make good use of the dust on the feet and the way that the environment interacts with the clothing, and the way that you get the dust kicked up, you get the wider, nastier framing, and it feels animalistic, which I quite like.
They kind of go for this whole efficiency angle with like Christian as well. Some of the fight scenes are like fairly brutal. I think probably the best one is the one like in the middle where they're gonna go and kill Dana, and then he's coming to like save her. That's a really like brutal sequence because there's so much improvised weaponry, various different objects, including like a sink, and you also get obviously Christian doing the thing where he just has to like keep on shooting people in the head to keep them down. It's both efficient and brutal. That is quite a good quality about these action beats. Cinematography wise, I feel like it only really came to life in the action bits. I didn't really notice any shot choices that I found to be particularly like distinctive or interesting. It was just sort of like generally well shot, but nothing outstanding.
I think for the most part it was shot standardly and competently, and it worked. It communicated what it needed to. There aren't too many images that really stick in my head with the film. The ones that do are Christian lying back after he's fought with his brother, and he's there framed in that darker light and just completely blank faced to Braxton basically pouring his heart out. Also, where the guy pulls the knife and he's got the belt and he's using it to defend him from and then strangle him with. The two bits that for me have the most cinematographic weight, because you get the power dynamics, and I think that's when it gets interesting, when they're trying to establish power dynamics.
In terms of the power stuff, there is kind of a funny reversal at the end of the bit where they're both sitting down and Lamar comes out and he's standing and he is standing over them, but he's pretty impotent and powerless, and he just gets shot in the head in like 2 seconds. Kind of an ironic juxtaposition as well, but that's more to do with like staging. But that was good staging, I feel.
I think it was because you get 2 people versus 1 in a situation, because you get the idea that Braxton's not going to do shit. Like, he's just there like, if Chris shoots him, he shoots him.
It was almost a touch of like dark humor almost, and also just because it kind of acknowledges the sort of stereotype, I guess you could say, where it's like it does typically have to be either a villain like that, like an old man who's like the CEO of a corrupt company. Either he'd be arrested or he'd be killed by somebody else, or if he was in shape, maybe he would engage the guy in a final battle. But no, he just shoots him in the head almost casually. It's a bit of a subversion, I think, and it's definitely a clever one.
I think it works because we've got this emotional grounding in the brothers' relationship, and it becomes like an interruption in what they're discussing almost. It feels a little bit more like this still has to be done. Bang, right, interesting bit again. Which is quite a funny way to deal with the
couple of other moments like that in the movie as well that are likely played for awkward laughs, particularly the bit where Christian gives that thumbs up to the couple that have just witnessed him like kill a couple of their assailants. To some extent, the interactions between him and Dana, if you rewrote that a little bit, it could almost be scenes in a like charming indie romantic comedy. Let's talk about the acting as well, because that's like a notable thing about the movie.
I think Ben Affleck's performance is good, but
Did you not think he quite convinces as an autistic guy? Or?
I'm not sure the writer fully understands how autism works, to be fair, because, for example, watching the scene where Christian tries to steel himself against being affected by sound and things, by blaring loud rock music and shining bright lights, and he's like, the only thing that's going to do is give him a meltdown. The only thing that's going to do.
In that instance, what I just assumed was that was something that was forced on him by his father and that he just continues, but I can sort of see what you mean.
I understood it from perspective, but I kind of watched that and I went, that's not how it works, though.
That maybe they were attempting to say that he's just been doing that for so long that he's gotten used to it, but that would be a hard thing to get used to. I think no matter what you would, because when he was doing that, at least in the first time that he was doing it, it almost seemed it was something that was making him calmer and something that had such an effect to where it almost didn't impact him at all. But if maybe they had shown that it was still very slightly affecting him, then that would have been a bit more believable. I agree.
Yeah, I still had that bit of distress, because that's quite a distressing thing. To be fair, like, I didn't mind it when one of the like there was one point where he was kind of like he was hitting himself with the thing, and he was stimming, and that was interesting. But then it got dropped later on, and he could deal with a lot of things like a lot more comfortably than I feel like he would be able to. Just seems to be no bother to him at all.
What they're trying to do in the film, I think, is that what they're trying to balance is they're trying to have him be, on the one hand, do a lot of regular things that people with autism do, like in terms of how they interact, in terms of certain, like, mannerisms that they have, some general stuff in terms of how they speak, like general things that anybody could look at and be like, oh yeah, that person has it. But they're also trying to make him special in a sense by kind of showing that he's also more, I guess you could say, comfortable in his environment or something because of the backstory that they give.
I don't even dislike the idea that they're going to go, that they're going, look, he's managed to adapt to all of this, but like, I feel like it would have been, it's fair. Now I'm griping more about the writing than I am the performance, but like, if they'd shown him still having struggled or just like adapting methods to get around it, it's not a stereotypical kind of depiction of it, is it? Like, it's not quite on the level of something like Rain Man. He has the frustration quite well, I would say. I think the one thing that doesn't always convinces, he seems to be trying to, monotone voices are very much a thing, but he almost overdoes it, if you get what I mean, in terms of the monotonous tone of voice. There wasn't very much of a deviation at all in terms of like very, very, very stressful moments. And it's not like people with autism have robotic voices all of the time. Like, emotion does still affect the voices for them, and that wasn't being done that well, I feel.
Agree that to some extent, both in the writing and in like his acting as well, he does like keep a very cool level head throughout the film, and that only really breaks in just that one little bit where he's annoyed being able to continue on with all of his like accounting and studies and stuff, and he starts to like freak out a little bit because that was stopped for him. And then, like, he parks the car wrong. And even when he's doing that, like, blaring music and flashing lights, he does go into that, like, stimming thing, showing that it's not working and that he has been thrown off. But that is the only part in the film that is really like that. Afterwards, and even beforehand as well, he doesn't seem to lose his composure in any sense.
My own experience, obviously dealing with myself, like, there's a slight discomfort in interaction that I wasn't feeling. I don't know, like, when you're interacting, there's things that they're trying to communicate without speaking to me. I don't know what they are, so it could be subtly frustrating. Even simple interactions, at least a little bit frustrating. You don't really get that from Christian and Wolf. And I think that for me is the biggest thing that I feel that would be more interesting, is to have that really subtle level of irritation. Like, there are very select people who I feel completely comfortable around. I'm not sure if it's a common thing, to be honest, amongst other autistic people, but from what I've been able to research, it seems to be.
So from my point of view, right, in terms of that whole thing, in the interactions between him and Dana, I did actually like those scenes. There was a relatable quality to it because it was basically a situation where she really, really wanted to know stuff about him. She really wanted to communicate with him. She really wanted to speak to him. And he kind of didn't, he kind of he didn't like outright keep to himself. He didn't outright push her away, but he just sort of having the conversation just to kind of have it. And that I found poignant because it's not that he doesn't like her, it's just that he's just not really that engaged. And I found that to be an effective display. And even then, they did sort of show that he was slightly starting to lighten up around her. And although it does kind of go in the standard he has to save the girl situation, they do still try and emphasize this whole quality of, oh, he does like her because of the situation that he's in, and a lot of other qualities as well. He just doesn't feel like he can be with her. It would, and yeah, it would have been cool to maybe give him a happy ending with her, but I think the way they handled it was still to some degree honest.
I really like they didn't get together, because it's like, it feels like a genuine friendship, able to like be how he was without pretending or without having to modify, comfortable with her. It made it quite a touching relationship. I would have liked to even see more of it, to be honest. Like, she kind of gets left at the end of the film, and I'm kind of there like, I mean, I know they do the bit at the end where he gives her the painting and things like that, but I don't know, I would have liked to see her more involved in that climax than she was.
Like, in the bit where she's being attacked, she is like fairly competent. She is still very much like the girl, so to speak, so she's not really allowed to participate in the action like Christian is at the end. You can see why, because her like picking up a gun and going into battle would look a bit silly.
I feel like not having her at all in the climax and having invested so in the relationship going forward. Just, I'm not sure I liked the way that it was left.
Let's go back onto like the acting. In terms of like Affleck's like performance, he was going in the direction of playing it really like calm. I think he did a very good job. Also because like I've seen so many actors just completely and utterly embarrass themselves when playing autistic people. So many examples, of that. And in this case, I feel like he didn't embarrass himself. I think he gave a very
I think it was quite a sensitive performance. I think
yeah.
he'd clearly done some research and some work on getting it right. And
Yeah.
like I'd say for the most part he did.
And he does like kind of downplay in that it's more kind of subtle, like the sort of the mannerisms that he has, his sort of general like stoicism, and even when he's having these more intensely emotional scenes as well, he doesn't just all of a sudden become like a completely normal guy. He doesn't switch modes. He sticks to a very consistent mode all throughout the film. If I have to give credit to him as a person, it doesn't come off like he's trying to show off what a brilliant actor he is. It feels like, okay, he's just playing a role.
It's clear that he's more concerned with, right, let's get this right, as opposed to, I can use this as an excuse to show all my physical acting skills and all my tics and all my kind of things that I can do that are a bit more out there. He goes, no, let's play this as straight as I can. Because of that, it just felt like a person.
The only flaw I do have performance-wise is just like, so you brought up about the voice, and maybe this was also to avoid stereotyping. He doesn't really change up his voice that much. He just sort of speaks like how he typically does. I think it could have benefited from maybe if he added a bit more of a low pitch or a bit more of a high pitch to the voice. And that could just be me, because something that I notice about myself and other people is that there is something very distinctive about the voices that we have.
Mine, for example, was a pretty much constant low register,
and mine is as well, but sometimes it can be high pitched. But for what it was, I think he did a good job. I think the other actors do pretty well in the movie as well, because there are so many plot lines that some of them don't get as much screen time as they could have, but within their scenes I think they do perfectly fine.
So Anna Kendrick's character, she really gets that sort of, it's she's both playing into type but like using it really well. Like she's still got this kind of like bubbly, quirky personality kind of thing going that she pretty much always does. But there's also this like really large amount of sensitivity and almost like observational empathy that she has, that she brings to it, that I find is really, really interesting and makes that relationship feel quite sweet actually between her and Christian.
He sort of like downplays her usual shtick and kind of. It also just because this isn't that kind of movie, but like also because of the way that the character is written, like she's not really written to be like really outwardly like forcefully, oh, I really want to get to know you, I really like you. She's just more like she shares stuff about herself, but largely speaking, she shows off that she is really interested in him. She is kind of like the movie's secret weapon of reminding you that it does have somewhat of a heart.
Sure, I would actually say she is the film's heart, which is why I miss her in the climax, because it works well, and you get these big emotional moments, but the heart of the film's not quite there.
And that is why I think the ending is touching as well, because you are bringing that back, and also you are emphasizing that although the life that he's living is forcing them apart, he still clearly likes her, sending her back the painting. Clearly it's a token of appreciation. So the last thing I do want to touch on is Christian's like backstory with his father. That stuff in the film, it's kind of what I mean when I say that I think that was left up to interpretation, but the way I feel about it is that I felt that the film was ultimately kind of coming down on that being bad rather than being good. It's not made hugely clear, but I think that when you like look at the movie and look at the way that the plot plays out, look at the ultimate result of everything, although it is saying that he's able to do all this fighting and do all this criminal stuff because his father basically put him through training that you see in these and to some degree real life as well, where it's like, oh, these tough military fathers put their sons through hell basically in order to make them physically capable and like able to resist problems. And ultimately I do feel like it shows the negative consequences of that. I think mainly in the fact that in the flashback where you see the mother's funeral and Christian's there with his dad, the way he reacts to it is he basically, not through his fault, basically starts the fight that ends with him being arrested and with his father getting accidentally killed. I think that came from the fact that his father put him through that training to basically treat stuff as a threat. And if that hadn't happened, then I don't think the movie itself would have happened.
A lot of the trauma that he's gone through is completely unnecessary, and a lot of the problems that he has now, if he'd been given the care that he needed earlier, wouldn't necessarily have happened.
Although the Francis character is a lot like nicer to him than his own father was, still basically groomed him for a life of crime. It has like a couple of bookending scenes as well that are set in the home for other people with like a developmental disability. It's almost a bit unsubtly kind of laying out this kind of whole debate between like, staying in these kinds of homes where they're kept away from things that will discomfort them and affect them, or should they just basically be like thrown out into the wild. And I think it does portray that group home as being potentially a much better environment, especially when you consider the ultimate reveal that Christian was getting all of his help from Justine, who was the little girl who basically gave him that puzzle piece at the beginning, who was still able to be his handler. It's almost saying being thrown out there might make you more of a tough guy. You can still like do what you're doing just in an environment that's perfectly suited to what you would find comfortable.
Halfway point would have been really nice, because I think the film does show that the group home might not be the best environment, because there's a sense of enabling people to not like have to deal with the world as it is. There's an idea of being shut away from the world, which isn't as great. However, I'm going to mitigate that by saying, it also shows that the father's way of doing it is clearly like not okay and really messes with what Christian's development could be. So I feel like it's saying there's a happy medium that there needs to be.
Within those two extremes, there can probably be a middle ground.
It leaves it to the audience to figure out. And as much as it stops the film having like the direct message, it also leaves it with some questions that are worth talking about. But I think, although I would have liked it to be clearer, I understand why it wasn't.
That kind of sums up the movie as a whole. It is a really like odd beast, but it is a good display of ambition. I just feel like, maybe if it had been stronger on a storytelling level, it could have been a great film.
I would say it's worth the watch. I would say go into it expecting something pretty decent. If you like action films, it will get your blood pumping. I think if you like kind of thoughtful dramas, I'd definitely highly recommend the second act of the film. I think the second act of the film is probably its best act.
To say, as far as movies about autism go, it's to some degree in between, but I think it does come closer to being a good one than a bad one. I think everyone has a different perspective. So you might come away from it liking it way more or liking it a lot less. We will be discussing another movie in this kind of genre, Shadowboxer. Goodbye. Treasury plot line. Although I can see why they resolved it the way that they did, at the same time, I don't know if for this film having it be that the investigation didn't really matter and I'm just making you the new handler, I don't know how much of an impact that has on this story. The entire investigation didn't mean anything because Ray basically knew all of this stuff already, and he was just setting up a thing that only ends up taking effect right at the very end. If they end up doing a sequel, this is probably what that will be, but just in terms of this self-contained movie, I think that reveal was kind of a problem because it just sort of makes that feel like it didn't really have a purpose.